This is March Chadwick, and today I'm going to expound a bit more on the Revit Building Maker tools. And the first steps to get there is to work within the conceptual mass and then bring that into a project and then cut it up per floors, and we're going to get some calculations out of the floor areas. Now, what I'd like you to begin with is regarding the conceptual mass tools. I'm going to introduce to you a family conceptual mass that I've created that will allow us to manipulate the building form and basic zoning envelope out of the project. So I've opened it here, which I'm going to ask you to download the file, which is called Zero Zoning Bulk with Street Walls, or ST Street Wall Setbacks and Sky Exposure Plan. Then go into and create a directory for this type of family underneath the library. I call it Revit Library, and I have this file called RAC, which is Revit Architecture 2010 Imperial Library. And this is where all the families are stored on your hard drive. I've created another directory called Zoning Families, and I'm going to ask you to open up the file called Zero Zoning Bulk and Street Wall Setback here. Okay, so when I say open this file, you'll see sort of the conceptual mass environment that is controlled by many parameters, or many reference lines, and these parameters that are kind of floating in space, but that are attached to reference planes and lines. This is actually a reference line, which has an interesting character. It comes in with a horizontal and vertical plane, so that you can control its angle, as I've done here with this parameter, which is kind of interesting. Go into what I'd like conceptual exercise by focusing on what the lot lines are. Now, the lot lines in this particular family don't appear, but I have controlled what the site width is by these reference planes. Now, the building width is on this reference plane, which I'll show you by zooming in here. This mass is controlled by this reference plane because of that 2-inch setback that's required, in the building envelope. Actually, let me go to the 3D view one more time, and I'll describe to you. Most buildings contain a base, a tower. I'm going to hit the tab button to control what I'm selecting, and a rear tower. It's pretty standard in most buildings in the city. They often have a cellar too. So this is the cellar, this is the base, and this is the tower, and this is the rear tower. So this is just a pretty standardized block that you'll see 8 by 100 foot. Now, again, this site width and the site length are controlled by the parameters that I've set here. We go to the first floor level view, and you can see that if I wanted to adjust the site width, I can go into my types dialog, and here within the constraints, I've created all of these parameters that control the site width, the site length, and in the rear set. Most residential properties, you're going to have a standard of 30-foot setback. So I'm going to ask you to just kind of stick within the site line, beginning here, going along this line here, and ending here, and this is the front line, and then this is the another side yard here. Okay, so within this family, I'm going to go back to the 3D view. I've created again all these parameters that control the height of the base. Let's change the height of the base real quickly. I'm going to the types, and now I'm in the family, but all of these parameters will show up in the project once you load the family into the project. But I'm just going to do it from the family here. I'm going to increase the number of floors of the base. Here it is, actually. 6 floors right now, but I'm gonna, and those floors are driven by these calculations, which I've totaled up down here, which is you have to set up the typical floor height, and that floor height goes into a calculation that will that you can see that ends up being driven by the number of floors. Okay, so if we adjust the number of floors to 7 or 8, hit apply, you'll see that the family is driven, similar to the blocks that we created, by that reference plane that's here, shift, and then holding the track wheel in, and I can pan around. So that reference plane is controlled by, you know, the base height, and the base height is controlled by the number of floors here. So the number of floors are calculated that go into a calculation that describe this parameter here is described here, which is that's the basement height. Base height is here. The base height is actually one of the constraints. I listed in the constraints. But you notice here I can't change this parameter because it is being driven by these other parameters. Is the number of floors times, I have to expand this, times the base height is the number of floors times the typical floor height. So that's what we've done here. Is the typical floor height, which is a parameter that we can adjust, is multiplied by the number of base floors, and then that controls the height of the building. So I'm going to bump it down to 6, like we had in the beginning, and we'll just adjust it later like that. Now, all of these these blocks in the building are controlled by these parameters I've already set up: the base number of floors, the rear tower number of floors, and then also the number of floors of the tower. So let's go ahead and hit types again. Again, we're in the family, but you'll be able to control all these parameters within the project once you get there. So really, you won't have to really mess with the family at all. You just need to load the family into the project, and then you could tweak all these parameters within the project. And then I'm going to describe to you the building mechanisms. But just so that you understand what's driving all of this information, I'm going to just describe to you one more time the tower height. I'm going to bump up the tower height to 6 floors. Hit apply, and all of that should bump up. Okay. Now the sky exposure plane is something that a lot of buildings in Midtown will have, because they are trying to provide light and air to the bottom floor. So they have a setback here. Number 1 is a setback, and that setback is controlled sometimes even after the setback, which is controlled by, like, this plane here, has a sky exposure plane, which will even make the building setback further. Most projects are just gonna leave that sky exposure plane at 90 degrees, and that makes it vertical. And then we'll just adjust the setback of the front setback, which is controlled also by one of these parameters here. There's the front setback. Tower front setback. Right now it's at 10 feet, so we'll change that to 15 feet and see what happens. See how it bumps that back. So this is a pretty good family that I'm going to now load into a project. All right. Now, one thing about these conceptual masses is they are masses. You got to remember to let's go ahead and actually create a new project. And this new project, I'm going to base it on just a default template file. Okay, say okay. Into a project, and one thing that you will notice in the project family when you hit VG, I type in VG for visual graphics, is that you'll notice that the massing is turned off. Well, you won't be able to see the object, the new family conceptual mass, unless this is turned on. So Revit prepares us for things like topography that we don't necessarily want to see right away. So it defaults to turning those things off, but you won't be able to see the mass unless you turn it on. So we're going to turn it on and bring it into the project now. So I'm going to go back to my Manage View, actually, and I'm going to switch my window to the Zoning Bulk. Well, I'm going to go to this 3D view. Either one is fine. They're both the same family. I'm going to load it into the project. Load it into the project. It's going to ask me to what plane I want to set it on. I'm just going to, since I'm in the plan view, so it's going to allow me to set it on this plane. So Revit is enabled show mass ability on the mass. So I'm going to say OK. And now it's going to ask me to place it on a work plane or place it on a face. I'm going to place it on the work plane because that we're in level 1, and so it'll allow me to place it on this plane that I'm drawing on. All right, so I'm going to click it there, and then take a look at it in Strange. I'm going to click this and make a 3D view. Should pop up there, 3D view. Okay, there's our conceptual mass. Very interesting. Now, the conceptual mass, like in the conceptual mass family, is controlled. Now it's actually one object here, okay? But I can go into the conceptual mass like you would like a piece of furniture or a window or a door, and you can change the element properties based on those types, based on those instance parameters that I've set up in here. Now you'll see that the parameters come in as instances here. So if I wanted to adjust the floors of the tower, I can bump it up here to 8 or 9. Say OK, and look at that. It's controlled by those parameters that we established inside the family.